It's time to make it, just give it a try. 'Cause you can make it like the old fat guy.
Thank you for joining us at another episode of You Can Make It with the Old Fat Guy. I'm David Farrell, the Old Fat Guy. Today we're going to make New England hot dog buns. What makes it a New England hot dog bun is it has flat sides, and instead of cutting it from the side, you cut down the middle of the bun and it opens up this way and you can put a lot more fillings in it. That's why I like New England hot dog buns. So let's get started. I have my stand mixer out with the paddle attachment on it. And here I have 2 cups of sifted flour that I had out, which is 500 milliliters. And I'm just going to put a half a cup or 125 milliliters of the flour in my mixer bowl. And in this bowl, I have 25 milliliters or 2 tablespoons of sugar, 2 milliliters or a half a teaspoon of salt, and 2 1/4 teaspoons or 1 packet or 12 milliliters of, and this is very important, it has to be instant rise yeast or rapid rise yeast. It can't be the regular yeast. And we're just going to add those to the flour in the mixing bowl. Now, what we'll be doing is taking this cup, which has half a cup or 125 milliliters of milk, 50 milliliters or 1/4 cup of water, and 25 milliliters or 2 tablespoons of butter or margarine in it, and heating it up to between 120 and 130 degrees Fahrenheit in my microwave. So we'll just take this over to the microwave. I find it starts at about a minute, so we'll just give it 1 minute, and that's on high. It's important that it not be too cold or it won't get the yeast going, and if it's too hot, it will kill the yeast. So make sure you keep it in that 120 to 130 degree Fahrenheit range. And you'll also note that the butter doesn't melt. That's okay, it's not supposed to. We're just trying to soften it up a little bit. So we'll just check it out. And that comes out to 127 degrees, and that's exactly what we want. So we'll just bring it back to our work counter. Just need to pour the liquid into the bowl, and it's important you use the paddle and not the dough hook like you would normally do for bread, because we're going to mix it up into a batter first. And we'll just put it on medium. Now, it will mix for 2 minutes at medium. It's mixed for 2 minutes. So we're just going to take the paddle off of the stand mixer and substitute a dough hook. Now, if you don't have a stand mixer, you could beat that liquid up by hand and then knead the flour into it by making a pile on the table and pouring the liquid in and slowly mixing it and kneading it for 7 minutes. But a stand mixer is a lot easier. So I'm just going to put the remainder of the flour in the bowl. And you put the dough hook down and turn it on low for just a couple of minutes until the dough starts to stick to the dough hook. And you'll just let it run like this until it starts to get a ball that forms on the dough hook. The ball's just starting to form up now. You can see that it's starting to grab and get a little bit hooked in around the dough hook. From this point, you want to continue to run the dough hook for 7 minutes. This has been running for 7 minutes now, so let's shut it off. And you'll see, you can tell it's just right because the dough's nice and smooth and silky and sort of satiny. And you're just going to take it off, and I put a bit of flour on the counter, and you're just going to roll it in the flour to get a bit of flour dusting on it, and throw it back in the bowl. I'm going to cover that with a tea towel and let it sit for 10 minutes. Our dough's rested for 10 minutes with a tea towel on it, and I floured a work surface just by sprinkling some all-purpose flour on the counter, and we're just going to take the dough out and make sure it's formed into a nice ball, because now we're going to form our buns. What you need to do is cut this into 16 individual small bowls, and you'll see why in a second. So we just cut it into quarters. There we go, and cut each quarter into quarters. Now you can, instead of doing all of this, you can buy a special pan for cooking New England hot dog buns, but it costs about $70, and who wants to spend $70 when you can use an 8-inch square cake pan, which you likely already have around your house. So that's why we're doing this cutting, is to get it into portions to make equal sized buns. So now that you've got it cut up into 16 pieces, the trick is to take 3 of the pieces and form them into a tube. Don't worry too much about it being pretty or anything, because it's going to rise and a lot of the imperfections will come out. So once you got it formed into a tube, just put 4 of them down beside each other in the pan. So we'll do 3 more. And 3 more. By putting it in the square pan and doing it this way, you'll end up with the straight sides that are the hallmark of a New England hot dog bun. And now the last 3 are going to go across this way. And you'll note we have 1 left over. You always get 1 extra little bun just for tasting when you make this recipe. So there's our 5 buns, and then this, just form it into a ball and put it right there in the pan. So just line them up like that. We're going to cover it with a tea towel, and we're going to let it sit for 40 minutes for the dough to double in size. Our buns have sat for 40 minutes in a warm place, and if you take a look at them, you'll see that they're doubled in size. They're nice and puffy, which is exactly what you want. Now they're going to go into a 375-degree oven for 20 minutes. We've had 20 minutes in the oven, and you can see they're a nice golden color, just what you want. And we're going to take them out and over to our workspace. So you just want to let the bread sit for a few seconds, just 35-40 seconds, so that it gets a chance to pull away from the sides. And then you just want to make sure it isn't sticking, which it isn't. And we're going to put it on a wire rack just to let them cool a bit. And that should sit and cool for, 3-4 minutes at least. 5 is better. The buns have sat for 5 minutes just to let them set up a bit. And we're just going to tear one off. Oh, look at that wonderful steam and the beautiful bun. I can just hardly wait. Now, remember, you cut these from the top, but don't cut all the way through. Just cut down like that. And now you can load that up with tons of stuff. As it so happens, I like my hot dogs with just a bit of mustard and a bit of relish. And I have a cooked hot dog right here that we shall put in our bun. You're all jealous now what's better than a hot dog, but you can see how it's cut from the top. Now we get to taste it. You can't buy a bun that good. Fresh bread is so much better than anything the stores make. It's got a wonderful texture. It doesn't overpower the hot dog. This is a wonderful hot dog bun, and you can make it. So I hope you'll tune back into our next segment and see what else you can make like the old fat guy.
In today's episode, David made New England hot dog buns. The ingredients used were all-purpose flour, sugar, rapid rise yeast, salt, milk, water, and butter. For the complete recipe, visit oldfatguy.ca. Remember, you can make it. It's time to make it. Just give it a try. 'Cause you can make it like the old fat guy.
Thank you for joining us in another episode of You Can Make It with the Old Fat Guy. That's me, David Farrell. Today I'm going to make a blueberry pudding cake. Everybody loves cake for dessert, but by the time you make up all the layers and ice it, it's just so much work, and who wants to do all that work? So instead, we're going to make a cake that makes its own cake on top and a pudding underneath, just like our mother used to make from those cheap mixes when we were kids, but this is going to be way better. So let's get right to making a blueberry pudding cake. We start off with 3 cups or 750 milliliters of blueberries. You can use fresh or frozen. These are some frozen I've just had out of the freezer for an hour. And then you're going to sprinkle over them 125 milliliters or half a cup of sugar and mix it in. Once you have the sugar mixed into the blueberries, you need to make the batter for the cake to put on top of them. So I have my stand mixer out and ready to go, and we're going to start by creaming 125 milliliters or half a cup of butter with 175 milliliters or 3/4 of a cup of sugar. It's important you start slow so the butter doesn't go flying out and send sugar all over the room. And then slowly increase the speed until it starts to mix up with the sugar. You want to let it beat until the sugar's well mixed in and it looks like one solid color and mass. That'll take a minute or two. You'll note that it's a little bit faster because I had the butter out for about an hour before we started. It just makes it quicker than doing it cold right from the fridge. Once the butter is mixed up, you just want to turn your mixer off and you want to add 1 egg. And then beat it up for just a little bit more. Again, start slow and increase the speed. As it beats up, it'll start to get a little more liquid, which is what you're looking for. It's starting to get a little creamy now and a little more of a liquid mass. So we're just going to slow it down and add a 2nd egg. You do the eggs separately because they mix in better rather than trying to mix them in all at once. It tends to separate. Start it slow, pick up the speed, and let it beat in until it starts to look like a liquid mass. You can see it's starting to look like a batter now. So we'll just shut it down and we'll give it a quick stir, or scrape rather, just to make sure we're all nice and got all the ingredients well mixed. So, of course, every batter needs a liquid and some flour. So what we have here is 300 milliliters or 1 1/4 cups of flour with 8 milliliters or 1 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder and 1/2 a milliliter or 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. And we're going to put just about 1/3 of this in and give it a little stir. When it starts to look like it's mixed up, we're going to add a little bit of the liquid ingredients. So now we're going to add half of 1/2 cup or 125 milliliters of milk. And again, just stir it up until it's starting to combine. Then we're going to add a 2/3 of the dry ingredients. The reason you're alternating like this is you don't want to mix all the flour in at once, or like bread, it'll give off gluten and it'll give you a heavier cake. Alternating it gives you a lighter cake. So we'll mix the 2/3 of the flour in. And the last of the milk. And it's looking now like a real good cake batter. We just have to put the last of the flour in. And we'll let that mix up. As you can see, it's not a difficult batter. It's not like the bigger cake batters where you're doing eggs and whipping them till they lift. You don't have to do any of that kind of work for this. Once it's kind of mixed, you'll note there's some flour around the top and that. So once again, you just want to give it one scrape to get all that flour mixed in to your batter. And then we'll just mix it for a second longer. And your batter is ready to put on top of the blueberries. So we'll take the paddle out and scrape that off. Just get this out of the way. And put that out of the way. Now the batter's just got to be poured over the blueberries. And there we go. Now just move it around. Don't have to worry about getting it smooth. You just want to make sure there's some batter over all parts of the blueberries. It'll settle when it cooks. So now that you've got the batter on the blueberries, we have to make the secret of a pudding cake, which is to put a hot boiling liquid on top of it and then into the oven. So I'm just going to head over to the stove. By the way, I forgot to mention that I added a teaspoon of vanilla at the end of the mixing before I beat it up. So just so you know, that's something you should do. What I have in this pot is 1 cup or 250 milliliters of orange juice, and in this cup, 1/3 of a cup or 75 milliliters of sugar. I'm going to mix the two together over high heat on my stove and just cook it till it's boiling. This will take a minute or two. The reason you want the liquid to be boiling is when it's hot, it makes that batter float up when you pour it on the top, and this will sink to the bottom to make the pudding layer. And we're getting close. It's starting to steam. There you go. You're seeing some bubbles starting to break from the bottom. That's what you're looking for. Now that it's really boiling well, you just carefully pour it over the top of the batter. Be careful not to mix it in. You just want it poured over the top. Do not do anything to mix it. And then we're just going to put that into a preheated 350-degree oven. It's going to stay here for 50 to 55 minutes. I baked the pudding cake for 55 minutes at 350 degrees. It's for 50 to 55. It's just got to be brown on the top and showing sauce around the edges. If you want to make really sure, put a toothpick in the cake part, and if it comes out clean, it's ready. It will be a little jiggly. What you have to do is let it sit for 10 minutes for the pudding part to set up, which I have done. And now comes my favorite part, having the taste of the pudding cake. So we'll just spoon some out. And we'll put a little bit of the sauce over the top. And it's not really good unless you put some ice cream on the top. So I have some ice cream. Let's give it a try. a really light, sweet, but tender sponge cake with a beautiful blueberry sauce. It has just a touch of tart from the orange juice. It really combines well, and the ice cream, of course, creamy ice cream over it, just makes it perfect. This is a great cake, and you can make it.
In this recipe, ingredients used were 750 milliliters of blueberries, 375 milliliters of sugar divided, 125 milliliters of butter, 2 eggs, 5 milliliters of vanilla, 300 milliliters all-purpose flour, 8 milliliters of baking powder, 0.5 milliliters of salt, 125 milliliters of milk, and 250 milliliters of orange juice. For the complete recipe, visit David's blog at oldfatguy.ca. And remember, you can make it.